So there's another thing that I kind of wanted to show here. So pretty much what I've done here with the organization. So this is similar to the way the IPA is organized, but I put a little bit more thought into it than that. For each language whose phonology I worked out, which is something like 150 languages or so that I have charts like this that I made up for. Scattered all around the world, all sorts of different language families and whatever. Basically, what I looked at was how the sounds appear most likely or plausibly to be organized in the minds of speakers, or a plausible possibility for this, right? So basically, you get these binary tree structures, which it's difficult to see here. It's easier to see here, but it's the same tree. So we have the ultimate parent node, which is the vocal tract, and then that splits off into, in this case, labial and orolaryngeal. So this is labial is with the mouth. Orolaryngeal is like involving the tongue or things further back in the mouth. And then the orolaryngeal splits off into lingual, which involves all the sounds that involve the tongue, and glottal, which is in this language. There might be other branches on that too that might split off depending on language. You might have like epiglottal sounds and things like that. But for Hmong, we only get glottal there. And then lingual breaks off into coronal and dorsal. Coronal breaks off into dental and retroflex, with dental breaking off into central and lateral. So here you have a contrast of how the tongue is sitting. Is it just, pretty much sitting across the mouth, central, or is it pulled in, contracted laterally? Let's see. And then A prime dorsal is split off into as far as consonants go, the palatals, and as far as the vowels go, the acute vowels on one branch. And those are the same terminal node there, because I feel like that makes sense. Y and E are basically the same thing. It's just duration, really, that changes E to E. Right. And then grave, and a grave is then split off into velar and uvular. So you can see that here we get all of the things, and this is a little bit more compact than like the IPA, because I also include the vowels in here. So that YI distinction, you get the palatal consonants, but also the acute vowels. So it goes all the way down to E and A. And then velar gives us the central vowels, and uvular gives us the back vowels. Ish, kind of. It doesn't perfectly. You can see here the way I have it misaligned here, that's on purpose. It's slightly misaligned so that basically that parent node there is what's lining up with those back vowels. But you kind of get the idea that, velar is in front of uvular, so central is in front of back. Like, you can kind of see it here. It's not necessarily meant to be a perfect representation of the geometry of the vocal tract, but it is very suggestive of what's accurately happening there. And then basically we have your kind of continuum from like the obstruents through the sonorants, and it grows more sonorous as we come down. And so voicing also tends to increase as we go down. So this top group here is unvoiced. What is that? Anyway, so yeah, those top three are obstruents, and they're also unvoiced classically. So you get, like a f and a s and a sh, things like that. And then in your sonorants, that's going to include your nasals and your continuants, but also your vowels. And those are all classically voiced in this language. So it's sort of an approach based on the IPA, but we can sort of tweak it and kind of get a little bit of an intuition about how things might pan out based on how a speaker might be thinking about the relationship between these sounds, at least plausibly. And then you can take this and then compare it to like some weird rules, like, well, why can the laterals only go with these sounds? In some of the dialects, this makes sense that it can only go with the labials. But in Mongjoa, this isn't a category, so maybe that doesn't make as much sense. Maybe we need to reanalyze this for Mongjoa. So, yeah. Which I didn't do. But yeah, there's some sort of non-traditional ways of looking at this that I developed. And I like to, on a lot of these, if the language has a standard orthography, an official orthography, or a native orthography, I like to use that in place of the IPA, because a lot of times when you do it right, it actually explains the writing system very, 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 very well. Like the one with Korean, I think that was the first one I did, and it explains what those characters or what the letters in Korean are representing far better than an IPA representation could, right? Because you get things with the IPA representation, you're like, well, does this B that's right here, does it get prenasalization, or does it get trailing nasalization, or does the M get does the nasalization stop, or like weird shit that happens in Korean makes sense when you look at it the correct way. So, and when you look at it the correct way, usually the writing system aligns with things really, really nicely. But because the IPA is kind of like this generic blanket system that works pretty well in all cases, but doesn't work perfectly in any case, is what everybody is trained in and grown to accept. They tend to think of everything in the way that the IPA is structured, and like, oh, well, that's how it works. No, it isn't. But it's a really good, useful approximation. But we can do better. We can do better. You make these up specifically for each language, and they're not going to... This doesn't look like the chart for Odom. This doesn't look like the chart for Khmer. This doesn't look like the chart for Swahili. This doesn't look like the chart for Jutuan. This doesn't look like the chart for any other language. It looks like the chart for Hmong. And different dialects of Hmong, which have phonological differences between them, will have slightly different charts, even if they have the same exact phonological inventory. That's what this is about up here. This is to capture that information. But this is heresy. And professional linguists, phonologists, and phoneticians have lectured me about how I fundamentally don't understand what I'm doing here.